There was no red over that microphone.
Sarah, can you ask people to mute?
Yeah. Okay. If everyone can please just mute their microphones. In the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a mute button, and if you can just click on that and ensure your mic is muted. Thank you.
Must be Ron Dickinson.
You want to announce the agenda part, Sarah, and then we can, Mayor Pullman, and call it to order?
Yeah, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to tonight's special council meeting. I'd like to note that this is a special council meeting to discuss item 7.1 on the agenda, and there will be no public comment portion tonight. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Mayor Jan Polderman.
Thank you. I'd like to call the special council meeting of February the 15th to order at 6:02. Could I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
Councillor Hayes, so moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any late items? Hearing none. All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
All right. Okay, so then we are on to 7.1 staff reports.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to turn this over to James High, our project manager. We're going to be putting forward a staff report on contract award for municipal land debris removal. Mr. High, are you ready?
I am. Can you hear me all right? Evening, Mayor, councillors, and to the residents of Lytton.
Do you want to?
Tonight, I'd like to bring a staff report forward with recommendations to Mayor and Council regarding the award of contracts, direct award of contracts to consultants and contractors to support in the debris removal within the village of Lytton. So the recommendation is that Council approve the award of a contract for an environmental contractor. This is the IBI group, also known as Tyrannus, in the amount of $250,000, which is approximately 10% of the estimated contract value for the entire village of Lytton for their scope of work. And also that we approve a direct award contract to a contractor, prime contractor, Matcon Environmental, in the amount of $350,000. And this would be for the execution of the debris cleanup in Lytton, again, with an estimated value of the entire scope of work somewhere in the $8 to $10 million range. So these are really starting points to get some early work started within the village, confirm some of the means and methods of work that we're doing, and start working on the remedial action plan for the remainder of the sites in the village. So as a background, just noting that there's obviously will to get started. We've heard that loud and clear, and the village staff have been working hard with the province and with council to come up with plans to move the project forward. We believe there's an opportunity at this point to award early works packages to the consultant and contractor mentioned earlier. Really, the recommendation for the direct award are listed for a number of reasons. Obviously, the public interest to get the debris cleanup started early. So while this award won't allow us to do activities across the entire town site, it will allow us to get started on some municipal properties. We don't have the capacity, in my opinion, to do full public procurement for every contract that we're going to require to let through the term of the project. The consultant and contractor that we've recommended bringing forward are currently the same consultant and contractor that are working for Lytton First Nation. They've obviously gained valuable and specific knowledge around the project requirements. While there are some different requirements for the village's properties through the Ministry of Environment and Heritage branch, there are a lot of similarities that we think we can take advantage of. Equally, those consultants and contractors were already procured through a standard public procurement process. And so we believe that knowing that public procurement process, that the Village of Lytton can tag on and leverage that process. Also, we've done some background checks and discussions around these contractors, and they're both known entities and professionals in this particular space. Coordination and work between what the village is doing and Lytton First Nation, and of course the experts that are already working in the field, should provide cost savings to the Village of Lytton. And lessons learned that are learned by the experts working on the project will be provided to the Village of Lytton and help provide some certainty to the project. And then lastly, well, maybe not lastly, but last point noted is that through the advanced mobilization of LFN, a supply chain of product vendors has already been established. So leveraging that existing supply chain will create economies of scales and save time and costs. When I say supply chain, I mean, you know, the trucking, the hauling, the landfill, the routes, the means and methods, you know, some of these items that have already been worked on and developed by the consultants and contractors. And then also the idea of a coordinated start, as Lytton is progressing quite rapidly through the scope of work, Lytton First Nation, as their consultants and contractors become available from the work they're doing, we think it's advantageous for the village to take that same workforce and move it over onto the village properties. This does align with our short-term recovery plan in the item number 1 of a safe return and re-entry, and number 7 of critical infrastructure. From financial implications, the expectation for these early works awards to the consultants and contractors are expected to be fully funded through a grant that was received from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Approximately 1.3 million of that grant was identified for remediation, planning, and construction activities. And so this will be covered through that portion of the $1.3 million identified. If approved, the communication through to the public would be obviously a notice of direct award intent on BC bid to notify the broader industry, but also updates for the residents on the village website, and then communicated through to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And so the options that we've laid out tonight that we're hoping will be considered by council, option 1 would be that council directs staff to enter into contracts with IBI Group for environmental qualified professional consulting and Matcon Environmental for construction. And as noted before, both of these entities are the same providers currently completing similar services to the Lytton First Nation for the debris removal project. Option number 2 is that council directs staff to undertake full public procurement activities for consultant and construction services required by the Village of Lytton for the project. Staff is recommending option 1 for your consideration.
I could provide further comment on the fact that staff has done our due diligence in terms of speaking to our legal counsel on this, because there is the WTA agreement and so on. We also spoke with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs because the funding is coming from them. Both sources noted that working with contractors that are already on site for recovery efforts with the Lytton First Nations may provide some economies of scale and faster response to the debris removal. There is no intent to provide assistance to a business, nor is there evidence of a conflict of interest with either of these contractors. So in this case, we are basically piggybacking our procurement process with our neighbors who already have people in action. And the second key requirement for the trade agreements is that there must be transparency in the procurement process. The request for direct award is on public agenda, and as noted in the report, the procurement processes, which the village will piggyback, were undertaken using public procurement best practices through the neighboring Lytton First Nations. So we've done our due diligence from that perspective. So then now it's up to council to make the recommendation to decide what you'd like us to do.
Do we have a timeline for when this would be completed? Our portion would be completed?
Is that
What
for
she can
me?
ask First, yeah.
Yes, that would be for you, James, sorry.
Yeah, sure, Councillor Gray. So obviously what we're hoping for is really an advance on the main body of the project. We believe that by actioning the 5 municipal properties first, there's some opportunity to learn from that and validate the volume that's coming out, and the trucking routes and the contract, and really just sort of get our methods and procedures in place. That scope of work for those 5 properties for the remediation is expected to take about 7 days at the current plan. We believe as soon as the funding agreement with Municipal Affairs is in place, which is anticipated shortly, we're probably a couple weeks from getting the contracts in place and mobilizing the contractor. So I would say that this work could probably be completed within the next 4 weeks if authorized tonight.
Super, thank you.
I have a question. Isn't the pool and the visitor center the same property?
It is the same property.
So then we're looking at 4 properties, not 5.
That may be the case. They're identified as separate properties under the insurance claim.
That may well be, but I think both facilities are on the same property. Anyway, the other, I just want to sort of clarify what exactly on option 2, you're saying we're going to give them $350,000 to start the cleanup, and they will start with the fire hall, the public works, the visitor info, and the pool, which are on the same property, and the museum.
So that is what the prime contractor would be doing, yes.
Because just doing some quick math on that, at $34,000 a property, you know, you're looking at what, about 132,000 for cleanup, and we're looking at 350,000.
Yeah, I can address that.
Okay.
So because we don't have a consultant on board and we haven't done all the testing requirements to validate what is contained within these particular 5 properties, the assumption is that the remediation or the cleanup for this would be treated as asbestos containing materials. And so it would be a higher standard of removal. Additionally, the quote is a quote based on volumes. So there would likely be some credit to that if the volumes weren't, once we validate what the volumes are. So this won't be a fixed price quote to the contractor for those 5 lots. It will be us developing the cost and the methods and procedures for those 5 lots. The $350,000 also includes a contingency. There may need to be some cultural monitoring that is hired during that process as well, depending on what heritage, if there's a heritage site identified on either of these properties. And so, Mayor, very astutely, the price of $350,000 is not a fixed price for the 5 properties, and we're hoping to validate our assumptions around the cost within that cost or within that contract.
So like,
And if I might add just a bit further, that if we do have additional funds within that $350,000 and there are other early works properties identified, I think there'd be no issue with us moving on to other sites and working through those sites within the budget that we've given the contractor.
so like there's, like in option 1, what is the MatCon? They're getting 350,000, you know, up to 350,000 to clean up the 4 sites. Then it also says here, they talk about construction. What exactly is the pre-construction services for planning? What is that?
So the way we are viewing the consultant work, there's a lot of consulting needs to be done to validate the amount of contamination on each site. We have done some testing very early on, but we need to validate it. The consultant would then develop a conceptual site model around the cleanup and the remediation activities required on a site-by-site basis. Pre-construction for the contractor is going to allow our consultants to access their estimating and calculations group. So this is really allowing the consultants and contractors to come to the table as partners to the village to help to develop a plan that makes the most sense, that is estimated at real quantity rates, so that the consultants aren't doing that in silos. It's fairly standard for bringing certainty to projects to do an integrated approach where you bring the consultants and contractors to the table to both provide strategic advice to you as you develop the longer term plan. So pre-construction services is that, Mayor, where we've asked them to allow us to access their expertise in estimating and debris removal while we plan the larger scope of work, which then would go back to them as a contract.
On council approval.
So like I'm a little confused about this because you have option one where you have Tyrannus for 250,000. What exactly are they doing then? If Macon is doing the cleanup?
Mayor Polderman, can I just comment? So on page 5 of the council package, where it's
Yes.
got at the top, environmental consultant and prime contractor, those aren't options. It's actually just explaining the two that are part of the resolution. So Tyrannus starts with the QP and then the prime contractor is MatCon. So it's one section. It's below under options for consideration where there's the two options for council. Did that help? So option one would be to direct award to both the environmental consultant and the prime consultant. Option two would be that council would say, no, staff, we want you to go back and do a full procurement process.
Right. Because when I look at sort of the total of these two contracts, it could be up to 12.5 million that we're going to direct award.
No, well, currently we're direct awarding the starting of the two. Mr. High, would you like to comment on that?
No, not necessarily, except to validate that they're, the budget for the design and the actual operations of this cleanup are in that range, the order of magnitude for the full budget, Mayor. It would be council's decision for each work package that we bring forward for direct award approval from this point forward.
And so the $600,000, that funding is in our grant, in the $8.3 million grant?
That's correct. There's 1.3 that has been set aside for this particular portion of the project.
So then potentially there's 700,000 left over is what we're saying.
That's correct.
And what lessons are we expecting to learn from these people?
Are you speaking to the lessons learned that we received from them currently working on site doing similar work within the Lytton First Nation?
Yeah, I mean, it says here lessons learned by experts working on the project will be provided to the village of Lytton.
So From what I understand, when Lytton First Nation did the public procurement for their qualified professional, which has turned out to be Tyrannus and Matcon Environmental, the contractor, there was a lot of assumptions built into that scope of work when it went out to the public market. Now that we have validated that scope of work, what's required and what isn't, based on the work that they're doing in Lytton, we believe that there will be cost advantages for the village because there are less assumptions around the amount of work and the type of work that we need to do to move through the cleanup process within the village. So this team is going to be able to share those advantages with the village as we develop the scope of work for the remainder of the remediation.
Okay, so next question is, like right now, they have one hoe working on IR 18. And if the village is added to it, are they adding equipment to their workforce?
They are, yes. So the discussion that I had directly with them is that we wouldn't be eroding the workforce from what they're doing with Lytton First Nation. So this would be +1 or +2, depending on what we needed.
Okay. I think that's about all the questions I have. So basically tonight, what I see we're doing is we're committing to spending $600,000, and for that, we will have somebody coordinate the debris removal, and that'll be of the 4 sites: the fire hall, public works, the pool, and the museum. Am I correct there?
You are correct. And if we can get other public sites take advantage of doing work while we're on site with additional sites while we're there, then I think we would take that opportunity and move forward with some additional ones. The challenge is that we targeted the municipal sites because we don't need permission to enter onto private land for those sites. And so while we get approval from residents to enter onto private land, we'd like to mobilize and start working on the municipal land, learn what we can, and then obviously as quickly as possible continue to work through the remainder of the village.
And so I guess the question I got to ask is how did the village get its permits and all its ducks in a row when the citizens are still in the process?
We haven't, we're working through that with the provincial government right as we speak.
So potentially we'll be starting the same time that the residents do.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Is there any further questions? Councilor Hay?
Yeah, Councilor Hay, I've got a few here if I could. I did a bit of a web search as soon as I got the word from Madam CAO, and I find both those organizations are certainly impressive. But Terrace was just bought up by IBI last December 2021. So I'm just not sure if they know each other that well. And the other one I need to know, I guess, is are we in possession of a list of references with the same criteria for work that we're looking at? Have we checked references out from these companies? Because they're pretty broad. These guys do a real wide load of stuff. Have we checked references?
I'll answer that question first. No, we have not checked references. They're known entities in the market, as Matcon being the largest civil environmental contractor in the province, and Tyrannus being a boutique environmental firm that specializes in this kind of work. And so your first question about the IBI group, yes, there was an acquisition. IBI is a very large engineering firm who acquired Tyrannus. My understanding in discussions is that we would still be receiving the services from the same core group of Tyrannus, who was a boutique environmental firm. And so we would be receiving the services from the same individuals that are currently working within Lytton First Nation.
Okay, good, because that Terrace had a pretty impressive bunch of people working with them. So a concern I have, as I've witnessed on more than one occasion, is once a contract has been awarded, the long line of change orders starts. And my concern is we engage with these companies and there are cost overruns. Where does the extra funds come from and how much is the maximum the village can secure? And if I just before you answer that question, I'm gonna say, throughout my career, both as a CAO and on council, I've always been assured everybody's gonna be held to the contract, and I've yet to see one ever happen.
If I can address that, I believe that there is a lot of risk embedded in this project and there are a lot of unknowns, Councillor. I think there is zero certainty in reality around the market and what we're going to find in the ground. What we're hoping to do is to protect the project as much as possible with these strategic procurements early on in the project, to work with the consultants and contractors who are already dealing with very similar situations in Lytton First Nation, and to try and leverage that knowledge to develop a work plan, a scope of work that we believe will bring certainty to the project and validate the budget through incremental steps by clearing these pieces of land and actually calculating the total true cost of these 5 pieces. We should then be able to extrapolate that further across the broader cross-section of the community.
Well, I'm not challenging you on that, I'm just giving you my back experience, because what I don't want to see is we end up signing a contract for 600,000, becomes 6 million, because we don't have that kind of cash. And part of my job is to protect the taxpayer, okay, both municipal, provincial, and federal, but we don't end up losing a lot of money. And the one thing, if you could for me, I don't know who wrote this, is on page 4 of the staff notes number 2. The prime contractor, I'm having a hard time understanding that. Is that just for village municipal property, or is that municipal and private?
That would just be for the work that's being executed by the village of Lytton. And so they would own the health and safety responsibility of the site for the work that they're on. That's the prime contractor definition through WorkSafe British Columbia.
So I just went through my head, because I do know the town fairly well, and what I'm going to say, and Councilor Gray, please bear with me when I do the first one. Look at the fire hall. This comparison to Councilor Gray's residence in square footage. Public Works, cement, brick. Info center equal to any house along Fraser Street. The pool, unless a complete structure and it doesn't look like the main pool is leaking, has to be dug up. And the last one, the museum, is equal to any house along Fraser Street. So if my math is correct, and the cost of debris removal as depicted in the report, the average cost of the debris removal is $70,000 per building, which in my mind is a far cry from what the residents have been quoted from their insurance companies, that $34,000 figure, and most of them think that's way too high. So I'm not sure what we're doing here, because and my concern is with the residents, not with the village. If it's going to take 70 to do that house, and they've been quoted 34, what happens if they get hit with a $70,000 bill? They're going to be crippled. And this is the thing that sort of I worry about. Okay, you've got 2 different companies. The contractors have said this is what we charge you, and they have not been in contact with the insurance company or the Insurance Bureau of Canada. So we're getting two different values here, and also with us, we've got to look after the cleaning of the. I'll use the slang term for it. We've got to clear up the stairway to heaven. We also got a park on Fraser Street, and we have another piece of municipal property up and back of David Harrison and where Jim McKay's old trailer used to be, and I didn't see them listed as being done. So I'm just worried about the 34,000 versus the 70 and what it's going to do to the residents. I think the village can afford what it's going to cost us to clean our place up, but I don't want a shock to our residents.
Can I address that?
Please do.
Really, what I'm hoping to do, these are estimates that we have obtained on short notice with the contractor to really get them mobilized to try and help to validate some of the assumptions that we have. I believe after doing these first 5 properties or some of the additional properties with different complexities or different things on site, we'll be able to get a better estimate of the value of a site by site across the broader spectrum of the village. So I think we all share your concern. I'm sure everybody on the call does. So what we want to do is try to protect that and bring that dollar value forward as early as possible with real-time cost estimates. I think there's a lot of numbers being thrown around. I think the best way for us to validate that and be able to message that out is to actually get on the ground and start doing some work and getting the costs for hauling, getting the cost for dumping at the landfill, getting the cost for time and labor, and all the complications that come along with it. So 100% agree with the comments, and I think that by making these first steps, we'll be able to bring that certainty to the cost per lot back to the residents of Lytton.
Perfect, thank you. My last query is, and this is probably not your way, is I'm not sure why you're looking after the debris removal remediation when we've got the Municipal Insurance Association carrying our insurance. Why aren't they looking after all this for us, the same as they are for the insured people in town? We pay for that insurance.
You did, and I'm sure they're very capable of doing it. We're in early negotiations to execute that work on behalf of the municipal insurers. Again, because we believe there's efficiencies for one body to coordinate as much of the work as possible. We're also in discussions with the RCMP to do their scope of work. So we can either have a number of separate entities on site doing a number of separate discrete scopes of work, or we could coordinate that work through one entity. The Village of Lytton is coordinating the majority of the work. JS Held is coordinating the remainder of it. And so we think that's logical that we would support the insurers and other institutional providers to do the debris cleanup. We will still need permission to do that work, Councillor Hay. And so that, you know, again, we will have to make that determination as we work through those discussions over the next 4 weeks before we mobilize. What we're hoping to do is get the award, get mobilized, and start working through some of the other challenges that we've got between now and the time that the buckets hit the ground.
I could also add that the Municipal Insurance Association has asked us to actually work with them in this case.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
So my last thing is just is a statement. I say, unfortunately, to date, I have not seen the breakdown of the $8.3 million provided by the provincial government. What I mean by that is where the funds are allowed to be used. And I was under the impression that a little over $2 million was supposed to be earmarked for the operation of the village for the next 3 years. That's to keep us going. And I personally would like to see that amount placed into reserve where it doesn't get spent on something else. It reminds me of what my lifestyle. I wait for my income tax return to come in. The first thing when I get the check, I run to the nearest gun store and buy myself a new rifle. They don't plan for the rest of the year. And that $8.3 million has come in. I just don't want to see it evaporate. And all of a sudden, oh, yes, Madam CEO.
So I can comment on that. There will be a contribution agreement that'll come to council for approval. So you'll see the breakdown at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last one I got is for you. I read somewhere in your great writing, and I do appreciate everything you put out to us. The province still hasn't said whether direct hiring is okay or not, or have they?
No, they have.
Okay,
We've gone to both of them,
Yeah.
both our legal counsel and the provincial government. And in this instance, because of the economies of scale and working, yeah.
That's all I have. Thanks very much. Appreciate the answers.
James, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Would it be possible to get a cost estimate, or maybe I should say a hard cost for them having done one property? So at the end of getting one property done, would you be able to bring to us and say, okay, this property cost this much? We, of course, wouldn't be able to apply it, you know, liberally across the board, but it would give us a rough idea of what we're looking at moving forward instead of waiting for the other 4 or 3 properties to get finished. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I do. I think it's very possible. We are going to be tracking costs on a lot by lot basis for the insurers, because there'd be a cost share agreement with the insurers as well, and also with the Canadian Red Cross. So we will be trying to track costs on a lot by lot basis as much as possible.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
We need movers. Oh, you moved and seconded? No, we need a mover and a seconder, please, your worship.
Yes, I asked if there was any further, yeah, okay. Would someone like to make the, a motion?
I'll make the motion for option 1.
Counselor Hay, second the motion.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now we are moving on to the closed meeting.
So the public portion of the special council meeting has now concluded. Members of public attendance can now leave the session by pushing the red button at the bottom of the screen that says leave. And if you don't know how to leave, I can assist you. Thank you.